My name is Shahara Ghaznavi. I use they, them pronouns. I'm 18 years old and I'm from Ontario, Canada. And Charlie,
I'm Charlie Turton. I am 17. I live in the UK. My brain just turned off. I live in the UK and I'm diagnosed with Tourette syndrome.
Sounds good.
And I have some dissociative problems of my own. So, especially recently, like today, it's been interesting.
So we're fitting for our presentation today. So today we're going to be presenting about dissociative disorders. Just some trigger warnings. We will touch on trauma and different forms of abuse. So
I'm my dick.
Fuck off. Sorry. Just keeping that in mind. This is going to be a very fun presentation. So just keeping that in mind, if ever you guys want to maybe stop for a second, just let us know. And if you guys have any questions throughout the presentation, raise hand function, that should work perfectly. Oh no. Oh, there we are. Okay, great.
Oh, yes.
So what are dissociative disorders? So starting off, there are 3 types of dissociative disorders. There's dissociative identity disorder, dissociative amnesia, and depersonalization and derealization. And on the right, I found this infographic that does a pretty good job at kind of explaining that. Let's see. Yeah. So here we're going to go through the 3 kind of types that we talked about in the last slide. So DID, or dissociative identity disorder, is when there are 2 or more distinct personalities or identities states that somebody can go into, and these are generally called alters. And I know Charlie will be talking about that later in the presentation. And this can come with some gaps in the memory about everyday events or personal information, even past traumas. And it's caused by significant stress or can cause significant stress in social situations. Depersonalization and derealization, those are 2 different words that are usually kind of used interchangeably, but we're going to break down what they actually mean. So depersonalization is when a person experiences an unreality or detachment to one's mind. So I've heard people say that it feels like you're watching yourself from an outside perspective. As I said here, people may feel like their bodies are outside and they're watching what's happening to them. Whereas derealization, experiences of unreality attached to one's surrounding. So like the world around them doesn't feel quite real, or maybe they feel like they're watching their life as though it's a movie. I've heard some people kind of talk about it like that. Of course, everyone's experiences are different in that way. The average age that people kind of get this or start experiencing these symptoms is around the age of 16. And after the age of 20, it's less and less diagnosed, but can still be diagnosed after that age. And of course, this is related to PTSD. And on the right, I have an infographic that I'm going to zoom into in this. This picture really goes through everything that we're going to be talking about. So I can share that picture with you guys later if you want, but that's that. And next we're going to go over the dissociative amnesia. So there are different types or subgroups. Localized, so unable to remember an event or period. This is mostly the most common type. So I know a lot of people have gaps in their memory, like unable to remember some events from their childhood, maybe some parts of high school is a blur, stuff like that. Selective, unable to remember a specific aspect of the event. And generalized, so a complete loss of identity or life history, which is generally rare. And this is most common in people who've experienced any kind of trauma or childhood trauma. Other symptoms include depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and can also have a blurred sense of identity, which we talked about in the last slide.
Okay, my turn. Okay, yeah. When it comes to DID or any sort of dissociative disorder, every single one of them, there is this huge spectrum. It's not just a case of you have this or you have that. The same way autism would, in dissociative disorders like autism are based on a trauma-based spectrum. The most serious being DID, where you have an actual split of the mental brain and a specific another person actually living in your head that you cannot control, you have lost memory from. That's the most severe kind of dissociation someone can have. I'm just going to move my pictures because I can't see half the stuff I've written down. Acute stress disorders and post-traumatic stress are very, very closely related to DID. You know, most DID is triggered by some sort of traumatic stress, whether that being something abusive, household abusive, mentally abusive. Sometimes you can just dissociate just from having a really stressful day. My brain's turned off.
It's okay, take your time.
Everybody dissociates. It's completely normal. Have you ever like walked somewhere and then you've reached destination, but you don't remember walking certain parts of it, but you know you've definitely walked it because you have to have got to that point? That's where your brain's dissociated. It's drifted off into its thoughts, and it's completely normal. Everybody does it. I do it. My Nana does it. Say hi, Nana.
Hi, Nana.
That's
hi,
not
Nana.
what I meant. Dissociation, just because someone dissociates, does not mean you have a problem. If someone says, "Oh, you zoned out" or "you drifted off," doesn't automatically mean there's something going wrong. So, you know, there's such a huge spectrum. You know, dissociation is so massively huge that sometimes it's really hard to pinpoint and diagnose and things like that, because it's just such a big spectrum. And things fall into those categories very easily, and it's working out what is an issue that maybe needs help with or needs acknowledging, and what is just normal association, like, you know, kind of forgetting where you've been or doing something and know you've done it but you don't quite remember doing it. I find it happens to me a lot more in essays, because I don't plan essays, I start writing them, and I'll write half of it and I'll go, I don't remember writing that. And it's where your head and your conscious thought has just drifted off. You might have seen the mind space adverts, and it says about your brain drifting off into your thoughts, which is a kind of dissociation. There's, as Sahara has listed, some dissociations that may need help or diagnose, things like that, or may just happen in general. But just dissociation in general does not always mean it's a problem. You know, if you feel like you are showing symptoms of the things we've mentioned or anything like that, then feel free to ask Sahara, probably better, because my experience is better when it comes to living with someone with a dissociative problem than actually being helped with directing to the right people. But dissociation is such a huge spectrum. Don't immediately worry, you know, if I have this symptoms, oh, I must have this. It's such a huge spectrum, like autism is. So, you know, if you do feel like you are concerned, or you're kind of thinking, oh, that sounds a lot like me, feel free to talk to us, especially Sahara, because she knows more about it than I do. They know more about it, sorry. But yeah, next slide. I'm rambling, it's really great.
Oh, that's my thing. Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, so as Charlie talked about, it's a large spectrum. Some people think that there is something wrong. Some people might think that it's not an issue. So as a lot of us know, with Tourette syndrome or anything that we deal with, having a diagnosis is definitely a privilege. So statistics show that the rate of dissociative identity disorder, I got different numbers for this. I got 0.01 to 1%. But it's kind of thought that around 7% of the population has some form of an undiagnosed dissociative disorder. And like Charlie said, it's generally tied in with PTSD or with traumatic experiences. I found an example here. And of course, we're going to be talking about some trauma and some trigger warnings here, so very sorry if you need to step away. But some children find that they dissociate, or some, maybe not even children, a lot of people find dissociating as a way for the body's natural way to cope with traumatic experiences it might be going through. It's kind of like the body's way to kind of help you get through it. But of course, it does need help if it does affect everyday life. And I have a little infograph, a little picture on top as well. Charlie, back to you.
Okay. I'm going to talk mainly about DID because it's what I am more acknowledged about. My mum has DID, and I've lived with her 16 years of my life. So I'm going to talk about DID. If there's anything else you want to know about the other two, I suggest you ask Sahara, because I don't know as much about them as I do DID. Okay. The difficulties that some people have with dissociative disorders, including DID, having all to spend your money, changing your relationships. Sometimes, obviously, they are individual people, and just because you don't like them doesn't mean that person will. They can go out and you don't know where you are. You can obviously regain control of the body, and that person's gone out and you have no idea where you are. You can have a lot of missing time. I had a lot of missing time today. My mum's been in hospital. She's got 3 hernias. She had some stomach pain, and it's something they're going to operate on later. But we'd gone to go pick her up, and I don't remember anything from going to pick her up till getting home in the car about 5 o'clock at night. So, missing time can be a huge issue with people with DID, not knowing where the time's gone, not being able to find things. My mum's alters like to move things, especially one of the youngest. She likes to organise things. My mum usually does things alphabetically, whereas Ellie likes to order them in colour order. So, that can be a problem finding things. They can cause medical issues or have problems with medical issues, finding medication, refusing to take medication, not being able to take medication at the right time because they're around and the main person is not. Missing important things, like you might have like an appointment at some point, but it's you, that other person doesn't know that. So they're around enjoying what they're doing while you're tucked away inside, not knowing that you're supposed to be an appointment. And worst thing is if an alter decides to come out in public and no one understands what the hell's going on. DID especially is incredibly, incredibly judged, because a lot of people don't understand it. It's a very hard thing to get your head around. To this day, now and then I still sit and go, oh, Mum, could you? Oh, of course, Mum's not here right now. Why would she be? Now and then I think that. I still do it about myself. But there's one thing is, if someone else, one of the alters around and you're not, that person, if someone's used to talking to you, you're going to seem very different to them. They're not going to understand. A lot of people with DID are not open about it. You guys probably heard about the films like Split and Glass, which completely demonizes DID, and it is nothing like that in any way, shape, or form. They make it seem like it's evil, and many people have been beaten up, killed, or even worse because of those 2 films. There's probably more, but they're the only ones I know of. That's just a few of the problems and difficulties that people with DID can have in everyday life. As I said, if you are experiencing any of these things, especially when it comes to missing time, loss of money, or especially if you wake up and don't know where you are, I suggest you talk to your GP, because, that's a very big sign of there being something that isn't right. Now, the next bit I didn't actually write, and I didn't realise until I'd seen Margot messaging Sahara asking if it was okay that she'd written something. I was going to write out difficulties that I can imagine alters would have, but she decided she was going to write it for me, so I will read it out. Okay, she's written it from her point of view, so anyway. Alters difficulties. Sharing. Margot doesn't like to share, especially if it's food or it's something that specifically belongs to her, like something she bought, something that someone's been bought for her. Not being able to live the life we do. If you think about it, we have a life, friends, family, love life, animals, pets. One thing that happened when Margot, for me, turned up was that, she was seeing I had a life, but she was an individual, and why didn't she have any of that? She doesn't get to have the same experiences that I get to have, and she sees it as unfair. Like I said, the next one says no friends or pets like you have, meaning I have. She has actually got a hamster as a way of helping her because she has no one. Wrong body, not know what, not how I want it. A lot of alters have a physical form in their head. They can see what they look like inside. And obviously when they are out and using your eyes, you don't look the way they look to themselves, which can be confusing. It can give them dysphoria, all sorts of problems. think of it a bit like, I mean, I had a problem with my weight mentally, which drives me insane. I absolutely hate it. But going from backwards and forwards to being who you are, to then the moment you want to be out and socializing, being who you're not, you know it's still you, but physically, this isn't what I live in when you're inside the head. Don't like your clothes, another thing. Different clothing choices. We're different. Alters are completely different people, just like any other person you'd meet. The only difference is they live inside your head. That's the only difference. They're still individuals. They still have their own thoughts, their dislikes and likes. I love tea. Margot hates it. I like garlic. She hates garlic unless it's in like some sort of like Italian sausage with garlic mayo. She can't stand it. She wants to be able to eat what she'd like to. She wants to be able to eat what she'd like to. She has an obsession with pizza and doesn't understand that she can't have that every day. Sometimes it's not viable to go and get something she wants to eat. Always being told that they want Charlie back or needs to speak to him, not me. Another thing about alt is they can feel rather pushed away. Obviously, with there being the main personality, for example, that being me, fuck off. Oh. A lot of time, for example, Nana needs to talk to me about something important, and she needs to talk to me about it because it's something that involves me. And alters can feel pushed away, like they're not wanted in a way. My Nana's mentioned that Margot has sometimes mentioned saying, but you don't want me. Do you like me? Am I bad? Things like that. And saying he would understand. One thing that Margot personally goes through that I've been informed with by Nana is that Mum, you're saying that being kind of like, oh no, you're not going to understand, are you? Oh, Charlie would understand, and she finds it a bit patronizing, I suppose. Kind of like, well, why couldn't I understand? I'm still human like everyone else. They feel incredible sometimes. I mean, they can feel treated like almost vermin in a way, like almost parasitic, because obviously they're being treated differently. One thing I've noticed is that Mum, especially my sister, because my sister is aware of my problems, unfortunately, my alters have made it slightly obvious. I am not diagnosed with Diid. It is currently under investigation for me, but it is likely that it is something I have. My mum has Diid, and I've had dissociative problems for a very long time. At one point I thought I had Diid and I was terrified. Now, turns out my brain copied my mum's Diid. It was terrified. I was going through a lot of traumatic stress and my brain kind of went, ooh, that helps you cope. Let's do that. I didn't like it. I didn't want it. I was terrified. I couldn't go to school because I was so scared of what the hell was going on. But I was warned if I was to continue going through highly traumatic stress, that with my IQ level and the point that my brain had already copied a dissociative issue, it could cause an actual dissociative issue. But one thing, I guess the main thing when it comes to alters difficulties is being treated like you wish they weren't there, or the point that because you treat them differently because, obviously they sound different, but they still look like me or whoever it is. They still look like the person but they sound different, they act different, they say different things. And I guess shifting and understanding that is a different person can be very difficult. My sister's always asking me, is it Margot or is it Charlie? And I find it irritating. I can imagine Margot finds it irritating because it's kind of like, well, would you rather I wasn't here? You feel that favoritism a bit. You feel a bit pushed away. Sometimes I feel it a little bit as well as Margot does. When my sister's like, well, is it Margot? Can I talk to Margot? And it's like, one, I can't just call her out. Freya doesn't work like that. But, I can understand how never the same way she would, or the one who has recently appeared today, actually, would feel. But I can kind of imagine from my point of view how that would make me feel and how it makes me feel already with the way that I'm treated slightly differently, knowing that they exist. You can go to the next slide now.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I learned a lot from that. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's talk about some treatment and some support. So, depending on where you live, depending on where you live, this can differ. So I'm going to be talking about that on the next slide. But when going about treatments for dissociative disorders, we mainly focus on some of the major symptoms and the ones that the individual finds most stressing. And we just find coping. I say we. I don't know why I'm saying we, but the main goal is to find coping strategies to just ensure the greatest quality of life and best overall well-being. So psychotherapy or talk therapy is a common treatment used. And if you feel, like Charlie said, that you have any dissociative symptoms that are distressing to you, talk to your GP, and they can always refer you to maybe a psychotherapist, psychiatrist. Fuck off. There are medicinal pharmaceutical treatments that can help as well. And there are different maybe alternative treatments such as hypnosis and electroconvulsive. This may or may not work for everyone, but obviously it's very individualistic, as with any medication for anything you might go through. So talking to somebody who is definitely a licensed professional is the most important thing. Picture on the left is just somebody in talk therapy. On the right is just the different levels. You could tell this is an old photo. Charlie talked about it. It says multiple personality disorder, keeping in mind this picture is out of date as we no longer use the term multiple personality disorder and rather use dissociative identity disorder.
I still call it both.
And that's completely fine. And this is a question for me. Is it okay to use either one? Is there one that's usually preferred?
I don't know. I don't know. I tend to use multiple because my mum knew it as multiple when she got diagnosed with it. So I call it that because that's what it was called when my mum was diagnosed. So to her, it's always been multiple. Now it's got a different name, but I've always used multiple because that's what it was when my mum was diagnosed. And that's what mum described it to me as. So I say multiple. I know there's another word. I know there's another name for it, but I still use multiple because I guess it's what I'm used to. It's still the same thing. It's just been renamed, isn't it? Really. So.
Of course, yeah. And again, for treatments and support, depending on where you are, I put generally dissociative symptoms are paired with anxiety symptoms. So I included different links for, I could send anybody this presentation if they want it, links for Anxiety Canada, America, Beyond Blue, which is in Australia, and the Anxiety UK as well. And the picture on the left is saying options for managing dissociation anxiety. And some of the things they include is like exercising regularly, getting enough sleep, practicing grounding techniques, reducing daily triggers. What I got from that is just maintaining as much normalcy as well as a routine. And I think that's best for overall mental well-being, whether you have dissociative symptoms or not. I know that I definitely need to do that for anxiety symptoms I have. And like I said, everything is so individual. So whatever works for you, but keeping a routine very much helps. Boop. Okay, Charlie.
Okay, as I've mentioned previously, I live with my mum, who has DID to this day. She still has DID. Okay, I live with my mum, who has dissociative identity disorder, for over 16 years. I currently now live with my nana because of mental health reasons. She was diagnosed when I was about 7. I became aware of it when I was about 10 years old, after poking and questioning and pretty much going, but you acted differently before, Mum, your voice changed and things like that. Her dissociation was caused by huge mental and physical trauma as a child. Unfortunately for my mum, it was sexual trauma from about 9 years old to about 15 years old, which, as you can imagine, is absolutely horrific. My mum shares her head with about 16 individuals, which I may add, when I was writing this, I put 18 and she did correct me. Some of them I know quite well, especially Ellie. She's the youngest, she's 9. She has an obsession with phallic objects, especially penises, and saying it because it's funny, because she's 9. Saying all these words is funny to a 9-year-old, so she will because she can. While I've lived with my mum, I have had to be aware that yelling, shouting, anything that could raise her stress or anything that could trigger flashbacks, thank you, from her past could cause a switch. It could be quite a traumatic switch. It could mean that the person who turns up is also incredibly anxiety-stricken. And I have to be aware that the person who changes is a completely different person. I've got to treat them as an individual. If not, it could be 1, insulting, 2, patronising, and 3, could make the whole situation worse. Their needs, their personality. For example, I wouldn't talk to Ellie the way I would talk to Hannah. I mean Hannah in my mum's head, not Hannah on here. Sorry if I confused you. Because there's a huge age difference. Hannah is about, what, 50, 52, 54, whereas Ellie is 9. You know, you treat them differently because of the age gap. And remembering to treat them as an individual. Don't, you know, being careful to use the right pronouns, things like that. The point, and another thing is they could come round and not know where they are. They could not know what's going on. You may need to tell them, because sometimes in the past my mum has switched and the person's been like, okay, why am I here? What's going on? And not actually known why they have been pushed to the front. Which, as you can imagine,
where I am, I don't know how to get home.
Yes, my nana has had my mum or someone in my mum's head ring her and asked her to come get them because they didn't know where they were. As you can imagine, this could be quite frightening. One thing I have personally found quite frightening today is that I have had another person turn up, and I was informed of this by my nana on the way home, and I had no idea what was going on. The only thing that I know is that they are probably caused by a traumatic stress I'm going through at the moment. I'm quite suicidal at the moment. No one's fault or anything like that. It's just coping with COVID and things like that. I'm just not coping very well. And my mum, like I said, she was in hospital last night. And we've had to have my sister overnight. I lost my shit last night and I was screaming and shouting. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's when something like he might have turned up. But my mum has offered, if you guys did want to talk to her or any of her alters about their experiences, my mum has made sure that I promised to tell you that she would be willing to join the call one day if you guys would like to talk to her. You know, depending on if you guys would find that stressful or traumatic for yourselves. I doubt it, but if she was to mention what happened to her, I probably would ask her to specifically not to, because it's something that, you know, a lot of people are very sensitive about. My mum has got a lot better at being able to express it and share it instead of just hiding it and keeping and bottling it up. But I would ask her to specifically not to mention exactly what had happened. Obviously, it wouldn't be details, but, you know, just don't mention what actually was the cause. But she said that she's quite willing to come on a group chat one day as a special guest or something and do talk about it so anyone can ask her any questions or anything like that. So if that's something you guys be interested in, talk to Logan, I guess. I'm going to push it on Logan because I can, because I like to pick on Logan because I'm mean. But no, I'm sure that's something that if you guys did want to, or even if there was only one person on who wanted to, my mum would be quite happy to come on. She has offered multiple times. I've had a few people in my mum's head go, oh yeah, I'd do that. I don't know if personally anyone in my head would. Like I said, I only have one person, and I now apparently have two. Like I said, it's still under investigation. But if at some point Margot turns up, I would be happy to ask her if you guys did want to talk to her. She's very good at turning up whenever she damn well pleases, so especially if there's food involved. I don't know why. She's got an obsession with pizza. I don't get it. But I don't have an obsession with pizza. There's things that she likes I don't. There's things she likes I can't stand the taste. She can't stand the taste of tea, but I love a good cup of tea. She has actually spat it back out into my cup. Yes, it was, and I drank it, and Nana went, oh, by the way, Margot spat in that, and I just went, and just put it back. But yeah, if you have any questions about my experiences, what I've learned throughout living with my mum, if it's changed me as a person, anything like that, feel free. We are about to come to the next slide, and as Sahara has already excellently shown us, it does say you can ask questions. So, you know, we've kind of reached the end. There's not much more to say that isn't just asking questions or getting into immense detail. So if you guys have any more questions, feel free to ask. If you're Hannah, put your hand up like a weirdo. If not, just text us in the chat and say I'd like to ask a question. And yeah, that's kind of the end of it, I think, unless Sahara has anything else she wants to add.
No, that's it.
They want to add. So
no worries. And those are the sources we use if anyone cares.
I'd say figure it out. My mum is co-conscious, which means she can communicate in her head with other people. Co-consciousness can be very difficult, sometimes impossible for some people. I do not have co-consciousness yet. I may never. If it is if it is DID, it may never happen. If it's not, they may disappear and I never hear from them again. But when it comes to Margot, we do write to each other. I know my mum and some of her others, I call them others, alters, sometimes have sent messages to each other, but most of the time it's kind of a case of, at least for me personally, they kind of turn up, do what they want, and then I kind of go, I have no idea what they are, and Nana has to kind of fill me in on what's happened. That's not like that for everyone. Don't take my word for it. A lot of people have a lot better systems. It is called a system. Some people have it so they have arranged times where people come out. My mum has it a bit like that in the evenings on different days. Different people be able to come out, because obviously she's with my sister, so you know she can't have someone out all the time because she still has to be a mum while coping with her DID. But it really depends on the person. It really depends on the system, how well the system works. Things fuck off, wow, how that works as a whole, how well they work together, how willing some alters are to work together. Some alters don't like each other, some alters don't like the main person. There is nothing stopping an alter from being an asshole. They are their own person. If they're not a nice person because they don't like you, they're not a nice person because they don't like you. You can't make them like you just because they live in your head. Some people my mum has had in the past have absolutely despised her because they didn't have their own body, they didn't have their own mind, and they kind of blamed mum for it, even though it was not her fault. So it really depends on how well the system works, how much you communicate. Do you have things set in place for things like that? Me personally, we write to each other. That's kind of it. And like most of the time, my nana just fills me in on what's happened, if anything big's happened, stuff like that. At first, Margaret didn't talk. She only did sign language. She didn't want to talk because her experience with talking was my Tourette's. First thing, when she first came out, first thing she got to notice was my Tourette's. The swearing, not being able to control what she says. So she pretty much decided she didn't want to because it didn't sound nice and she couldn't control what was said. So she started researching how to communicate in other ways, and she discovered sign language. I know a lot more sign language now. But it got to a point where that was getting a bit awkward, and eventually we did manage to convince her to talk. So, something big like that, Nana would let me know. Margot started talking today. Something to let me know, because obviously with me, I can't see what's happening at the same time as them. They can look through my eyes. I get a weird cold sensation around my eyes. I know Margot's there now because it's really cold and kind of tingly around there. But I can't see what they see. The only things I tend to see is like a really, really sped up film when I see a few little slides and the blurry mess completely out of context. And most of them is like, when you move your eyes like that and I see part of the ceiling. It's not a case of I will see a perfect picture of what's in front of me. Most of the time it's when she's looked over there and I've got the transition bit and that's all I'll get to see. I don't tend to be able to hear anything. Sometimes I can, but very rarely. So to answer your question, it's pretty much a case of it really depends on how well your system works, how in communication you are with them, how much they're willing to kind of be co-conscious with you, and kind of what's been arranged or the circumstance why they have decided to be out.